Hello, hello, hello. Grown Black Folks Talk. The strange case of John Morant and the tragic profundity of human nature in spiraling. Uh, this has been interesting. I don't always get caught up in athlete stories as I don't follow sports that closely, but on Mother's Day, I met a lot of my students from a long time ago, and it's a testament that I still look as young as I am. I'm 42, but I've been teaching in the community in some respect, public school, also different choir events, so forth and so on, from Sunday school, Bible studies, 26 years, meaning that a lot of my early students are now adults, about John Morant's age. So this story affected me on a different level than it might many people in my peer group because I had ran into a lot of my 20 something students who are now, came by for Mother's Day and were like, "Don't you know me? Last week I am now a grand teacher. My students are bringing their children to my class now. I've been doing this a long time relative to my age." So the story of John Morant hit different because I have some students who were little boys when I started with them who are now about his age. So the first thought I had was, what would I do? What would I say? But I also realized that if a 23-year-old young man that I taught was behaving in this manner, I know that for the moment he's tuned me out mentally. This voice is not one of the ones you can easily forget. And I'm pretty consistent. If you were, 5 and 6 and 8 and 10, you've heard me say the same things about God, about life, about how to live for years. So I know that if you've forgotten me and tuned me out, because this voice would be back there. And if you were a Christian, that would also mean the Holy Spirit would be using my voice and what I taught you to remind you, and you've tuned it out. So me flipping out is not going to do any good because it's what for whatever reason the human being has chosen to explore, and that's also part of growing up. You know, as a human being, you grow up under authority. Hopefully, it was good, but that's not always the case. And if it's not, then the normal human impulse to see how far you can get out there and the experiment of being God over your own life is going to be augmented by the fact that you were never introduced to righteous authority. Either way, though, you're going to run into the fact that there are rings of authority many in this world, to say nothing but getting into the spirit world, just in the temporal world. And if you are African American, you are most unfortunate that most of those rings of authority see you as little more. Well, let me adjust it. Um, if you are someone who has only earned income, you are little more than someone who's a bit more of a liability than a slave because the corporation is the granddaddy of the plantation. I'm going to say that again later because I want you to wrap your mind around what I just said. I'm going to say it again. I'm going to say it a third time later. The corporation is the granddaddy of the plantation. And so when black folks just get all these arguments about earning income and who's earning this and who's earning that and what kind of jobs and whether we're going to be bus drivers or lawyers or doctors, everybody that owns these companies understands that we do not know that we belong to the granddaddy of the plantation. I'll come back to that. The point I'm making is that John Morant is at a time in his life where men do generally, as they become adults, as they begin to smell themselves, as they begin to realize that they are adult men in this world, experiment and test the boundaries of society. That's what young men do. And if he was a young white man, he would be given much more latitude to do this because of the system in which we live. It is very difficult for young black people to have room to be human and make mistakes. I'm not taking up for him. I'm just saying that John Morant lives under the kind of pressure that any of his counterparts of other races would not. And what is so remarkable to me about this is, I came at this as, okay, what would I say? I would remind him of what I had taught him about his value and about how he does not need to be trying to impress people who do not love him and do not care about him to try to be cool. I would remind him of that, of course. And I know that he would know that me being who I am, if he knew me, I have a standard. So if you're not gonna get to the standard, you can't do that over here. You have a habit of bringing guns around. No, sir, I'll escort you out myself. No, you're not gonna do that around any of the young people that I have under me. You will not be showing that example. But when you get your life together, you can come back. But he would know that about me if he knew me. Any of my students know 25, 26, 27, 28. You gonna present yourself to Mr. Yen, have your life together. So there's a standard. What worries me about John Morant, there seems to be a lot of people around him that don't have strong standards. Now, I'm not going to repeat some of the things I've heard about his mama and the things she's asking him to do and the behavior of his father. I know that he's hanging around with friends of his that have gotten him in trouble before. He's still hanging around with them because, people hate to give up their friends. But it boggles my imagination that everyone is participating, everybody is kind of allowing it to happen, everybody is setting up situations for this young man. I'm like, if he even so much as gets hurt out here doing this, all of you are going back to poverty. You know that, right? Not just him. It's going to take him longer, but all of y'all, all this is going to stop. How do you not see enough value in yourself to not be all of you coming together to encourage this young man to do the right thing? How do you not see enough value in your life to say nothing of his? But see, we live in a system where we have been programmed to see ourselves even as chattel to each other. John Morant's behavior makes sense when you consider it in light of some of the things that his parents have been doing. He is around a lot of people who live for today. You make chattel of every day. You get your money, you get your bag, and you use it today, and we don't really care about the consequences of tomorrow. Because his mother in particular is setting him up for situations in which there could have been no tomorrow. His friends are setting him up for situations in which there could be really no tomorrow. His father is hanging out with him in such a way that when no tomorrow happens, he could get caught up. Not be a help to job, but be caught up. But we have assisted each other in programming each other this way because we don't know whose hands we are in and how thoroughly we have been programmed. When John Morant went to school, it probably wasn't that much different than me 20 years earlier. He's 23, I'm 42. Uh, we, as older Black adults, middle aged and older, sometimes do not understand the extent to which our children are never shown images of themselves, looking like themselves, with their cultural background doing anything of importance. African Americans are absolutely essential, and not just as slaves. If you have a sole on your shoe and the shoe was affordable, if you went to the corner and stopped at a three-light stoplight, if you used a mask anytime in the last 3 years, you have all of those things because of African people in the Americas. Most, though, two of those were African Americans of the same survivors of the children of the survivors of enslavement. If you have food that was grown in California and you live anywhere else, you have that because a black man invented it. If you have a comb, a mop, a broom, there's some big old black woman inventions too. These are all things that, Madam C.J. Walker pretty much invented the entire black hair industry. But because this is not taught, our children do not see themselves as important and having a role in society. And it's our job as the Black adults to overcome that and to present that imagery. But a lot of times we don't realize that we need to do it because we didn't get it. Now, I was blessed that I did, but my curriculum as a homeschool child did not include it either. I didn't encounter Booker T. Washington until I was in my teens. But my parents and grandparents were not going to have it. They made sure that I had what I needed. So we get past that area. Then we get up into what is presented to us. John Moran is 23, meaning that he has never lived in a time in which the music that was available from Black people primarily is not given to him as toxic hip hop. I'm sorry. We don't want, I already did that video about how Black men are complicit. The Black men who complain about the Jews and all these different people in the music industry, no, signed their fathers and grandfathers, signed up. And see, this is the thing about it. And I'm going to use I'm going to be careful about YouTube standards. And here's the thing about it. See, if you knew better about your own humanity, you wouldn't be NWA. You would not even accept the N word as your descriptor. If you knew the value of your own humanity, you wouldn't accept it. So black men would not accept that label and be in Paris still listening to music calling themselves N-words if they really understood what that means. Wouldn't do it. Black women would not at all accept. I wish a Negro would call me a BRNH. I will not accept that. I know my value as a human being. I am a woman. I will not even let you be like a female. No, sir, that could be a snail, a dog, or a rat. I am a human woman, co-steward of the universe, sharing in the image of God. You will not. No. But because I know that, and fully believe that all the capability that comes with that, I won't allow it. For me to see black people being content under those names and trying to make those names better means we don't have a vision for being fully human. And this is why nobody around John Morant cares enough about their own humanity to keep their gravy train going or care enough about his humanity to basically keep him from getting killed. But there's something else going on here. A misunderstanding of the system you live in. I told you I was going to say it again. Miss Ebony and Miss Van Sant. And before that, any number of arguments that black men and black women are having about earned income. Stephanie Perry has been shouting this alarm for a long time. These jobs ain't loyal. Let me tell you why. The corporation is the granddaddy of the plantation. I will put the book Own Your Own Corporation in the description. I gotta go find out who the author of that. That'll be an Amazon link for those of you who are interested. If there were no corporations, there would be no plantations. Do you understand? And probably you've never heard it before, so I'm not gonna hold you responsible for understanding something you've never heard. But what drove the colonial process for Europe were companies. The Mayflower Compact. Sure, they came for religious freedom as far as we know, but the Pilgrims are very rare. That was a small group of people. Everyone else had charters and companies. Perhaps you've heard once or twice of the East India Company. The Dutch had one, and so did the British. The armies of these nations were basically adjunct enforcement so that these things could be made profitable. The plantation was profitable because there was a corporation who was then going to profit on moving the tobacco and the cotton to the market. And people had come together to form a corporate singular business entity, all of them investing together in order to fund this thing so that all of them could be the shareholders and get a share from it. So everybody sets up their balance sheet the same way. If you look at the balance sheet and let's say, oh, I don't know, since we're talking about John Morant in Memphis, let's go back to Tennessee in 1864, because I keep telling y'all you in the 1864 playbook and you do not believe me. In the 1864 playbook, here's what you have on the balance sheet. It's the same thing you have on every balance sheet today, except you don't see slaves on the balance sheet. Slaves were the only workers who were ever assets. All of you who are paid workers and earned income, you know why a company wants to protect its shareholder value and lays off? Because by virtue of you being a paid worker, you are a liability. And every company is seeking to reduce its liabilities and increase its assets and shareholder equity. So by virtue of you being paid as opposed to you being a slave was an asset because all a slave did, you had to deal with the expenses of keeping the slave alive, barely 7 years to adulthood. Now, it used to be before black women were imported, 7 years from arriving, because black men were imported as adults and working to the ground 25 full rotations before the mass importation of black women. That's where that number comes from. But 7 years to adulthood after that. And of course, adulthood in those days came all the way down to 14. So, not always even into adulthood, but that's a different video. You are, as a paid worker, a liability. See, and this is the thing about it. I need y'all to understand. The reason you don't understand why John Morant can't just get out there and do what he wants to do is because you don't understand how money actually works. See, with you as a earned income worker, there's nothing wrong with you doing that as long as you understand that you're in the granddaddy of the plantation. You are not even a slave who is considered an asset. You are a liability. You are what is making this thing red. You're what's putting the company in the red. But I work there and I create value and all the rest. You will never work hard enough to get out of this classification. And so here's what happens. The other thing about being a worker in a corporation is that you can be just like any slave, you can be replaced. You are nothing but replaceable. There's no work you will ever do that will not cause it so that if you're in this class of people, this class and this class all work together. See, business people know that they're in business to pay these people. The business exists to pay the owners and the shareholders. That's it. There's no obligation to you at all. You're a cog in the wheel. Which is why, if you do not uphold the contract, you can be replaced with someone else at will employment. You are not irreplaceable. You are someone who will be replaced if you get sick long enough, if you are out for whatever reason, if you do not hold the code of conduct, and if you start messing with the brand. And this is why, on one hand, people see he's a generational talent. No, he's an employee, he's a liability. The average, I was reminded by a friend today, the average NBA career is 3 years. You have to work 10 years to get retirement. So basically, you have to keep your nose clean and stay healthy for 10 solid years because the NBA, like any well run organization that is basically a multi billion-dollar corporation, does not want to have you on the books as a liability ever after you're finished playing. All you are is a liability. Then you're not even adding anything to the asset base. So this is why they have strict rules on how you get to represent the company. All employers have strict codes of conduct because at the minute that you start taking out more value than you bring in, you're gone. And because we do not understand our actual role in the system, if all we are is wage earners, there's a British documentary, 97% owned, not 100% owned, we're not slaves, but 97% owned. We do not understand what we are looking at. And this is why John Morant's family does not understand, and his friends do not understand the danger they have put this young man in and themselves economically. Because they see the superstar, Victor Wembanyama, for those who Wembanyama, I think that's it. For those who follow basketball, was drafted tonight, meaning that John Morant's replacement is either in the league or on his way. And because you do not know, if you do not know your value as more than someone who earns a wage, as more than someone who has to impress someone else that you are this or that, the other, because you do not know your value as a human being, these situations happen over and over and over and over again. See, Black people were brought here to be money for all these other groups of people. And some of us have still not gotten beyond that mindset because we have not established for ourselves that we have, because we are human, we have eternal worth. And this is why every day, 6 young men like John Morant is killed by another group of men just like him. The six, 25, and the number 6 comes out of a particular place, 25 times a day. Because again, this is the behavior of a group of people that does not know their value. Also, divide that number by 6, and you get the number of times per day. And this is all the FBI data. And if anyone can disprove this data with other data, I'm always willing to hear it. This also happens to 4 to 4.25 black women, 4.5 black women every day, because we do not know each other's value. John Morant's mother does not know if the allegations about her behavior and what she gets her son into, she does not know his value. John Morant's father is vicariously living out his dreams of being somebody through his son, meaning he does not know his value or his son's value. This is how we keep getting into these situations. And this is what makes the case of John Morant so heartbreaking to me. Why do I go so hard for the students that I have? I realize that there's a lot of a gap, even up to people my age and older, who were never centered in the fact of their own humanity and of their infinite worth. Now, of course, I have to center you in that worth from Christ's perspective. I'm a Christian. I'm not authorized to do it for you any other way. But you were fearfully and wonderfully made, and you do not have to be a master athlete. That's because you're human. You were valuable enough in God's sight that He sent His only begotten Son to die on the cross for your sins. He gave His only begotten Son, fully God, fully man. Your soul was worth that much. You don't even have to be an athlete. This is the same reason I don't tolerate bigotry of any kind. We're not doing that over here. Because a bigot basically is saying my twisted, ignorant, hateful standard is bigger than God's standard, and you just gonna let me do that. No, we're not. No. That's why I go so hard. Well, I come back here teaching, in essence, speaking on different issues. Some of you who have followed me through these last several months have known I have experienced massive amounts of grief. It is very, very hard for us as human beings who were not raised to understand the value of our African humanity. Not as a nationality, I'm talking about ethnicity. To rise up from going in circles with people who are making chattel of us. I have watched people return to places where they will be hurt and miss massive opportunity to be helped in positions where they can be helped. I've seen it offline, I've seen it online. I've reduced business people to tears. I have been the terror of people in the community. And I've also seen this online in a variety of circumstances. Like John Morant's family, we are struggling with the concept of our value. If I were immortal in this body, and I could lay my body down to be a bridge for all 37-ish, 35, 33, 37 million Black adults to pick up their children and get across to knowing what their value was, I would do that. But I also have to be humble enough to recognize, first of all, I'm not. I'm just a 42-year-old, aging, weary community warrior. I have now been in teaching in the community or performing community service since I was 9. 33 years. That's as long as some careers. I also have to be humble enough as a Christian to realize that the Lord Jesus Christ himself has put up the cross as a bridge between God and man to work this out, and everybody is not choosing that journey. So if he doesn't have all 8 billion, Deanne Matthews probably not going to be successful most of the time. Very humbling. And I'm not supposed to be because every person has to choose. John Morant cannot blame anyone around him for his choices. Part of the path to his recovering from this is going to be his recognition that he has to set the tone for his own life. Part of growing up is really recognizing that whatever happens from here is on me. There'll be other circumstances, but I choose how to respond. I have a situation in one of my work organizations that 2 white men are just acting a straight fool, and I was able to dialogue with one of them and said, "Look, whatever happened in the past, okay, you went through a lot of mess with this other person, but from whatever happens from here, I'm gonna give you 2 ways you can make a solution. Maybe you haven't thought about it, but I'm also documenting from today. This on you. You can either accept it or reject it, but the documentation is gonna be here." That someone came to you, someone showed you another way to get this right, and you chose that you were just gonna keep on acting a mess. I bet I ain't doing that. I told y'all about this. And when I watched Adam Silver and Malika Andrews discuss this situation with John Morant, I saw in Adam Silver sitting up there talking about, I just talked to this young man not that many weeks ago, and we sat down and we talked for 2 hours, and I explained to him, I know he's a generational talent and he has a tremendous amount of ability, but I had to explain to him what the consequences were going to be if this happened again. And I thought we had an understanding, and I was shocked to see this the second time. I'm like, Mr. Silver, I get it. You now, of course, he could be doing a real act because, and I have to mention this because I have to mention it. I've seen it enough times. People will see black people in their distress, and even knowing some of the history of what we've been through and why some of these behaviors happen, and will sit up and posture because that's their moment to act like, to let us know and let the world know that they're more human and more rounded and less savage than we are. So that's a possibility. But I did, from my judgment, I understand where Mr. Silver's coming from. Because when you have the hammer, see, if I was, I'm getting ready to do a story about, based in Norse mythology for my writing platform. See, if I'm one of the people, I understand Thor completely. Mjolnir, the Thunder Hammer, is heavy. But see, when you got it and people keep acting a fool and playing around and all the rest of it, if you know what this thing does, you don't want to drop that necessarily. You don't take, if you're someone like me, you hand me Mjolnir, it's just like, okay, I know what this thing will do. But see, then you get backed in the corners because people don't leave you any extra options. It's just like at some point, you're in a position where, again, Adam Silver is running a very, very large, multi-billion-dollar enterprise. He got to protect the brand. He got to protect the franchises. So what's he gonna do? Let me tell you something. To go back to what we were talking about before, and I've talked about this on previous videos, so we're just gonna get this in here as we wrap this up. Let me tell you something. For those of you who think about earned income only, this really gets people in trouble because you don't understand it, Adam Silver. See, here's the thing about over here. When you live over here, you're not responsible for building anything. And this is why all these silly conversations don't go on online around earned income. People are in spaces of capital having really dumb arguments because they don't know any better. They're not necessarily stupid, they just don't know. They don't know that the people over here are way more concerned with what they're building together than they are about you. The people over here are going to watch out for each other. They're going to be the last to go broke. You're going to be first, which is why we had this conversation earlier in the spring. When you on someone else's real estate that they build, you have to be really careful because people who build care a whole lot more about what they're building than they care about you. You are replaceable. If you're not building, you have to go find somewhere else to be. It's like renting and messing up a rented house. Okay, that's fine. You don't own it. Now, people get out of pocket and mess up rented houses because they're not responsible, but you keep on doing that and you're going to be homeless because you get to the point where no one rents from you, rents for you. You got to get them references to get indoors. What owners do and builders do is close ranks against you. Same thing with Adam Silver. See, the thing about it is, Adam Silver's hand has now been forced because he has to protect the brand, he has to protect the NBA. So as much as he's up there talking about, I was just shocked. He gonna pass that shock right back. Watch. And again, these situations happen because we do not understand. We are not N's, B's, and H's. We do not have to pretend to be these things to have human worth. We have to break this codependent mindset. I told y'all on a previous video, I have a favorite cantata by Bach. Ich habe genug. I have enough. I have my savior. And if you listen to the rest of this, and you have to think to yourself, Bach is someone who lost a wife and 10 children. He lived for quite a long time, but he was ready to go when he went. You have to get to the point where you're willing to let the world go and all of its trappings and all of its conformity. You almost have to get there to accomplish greatness. If you come by, I'm not talking about a church path. Church is one of the most codependent places on earth. And a lot of what goes on in church buildings is foolishness. and everybody stays with the foolishness. COVID was the greatest thing to ever happen to African American churches because people realized they could live without the foolishness. They had 2 years to live without it. And that was good because it gave people an opportunity to figure out, okay, what is it that we really should be doing? And is the place I'm in, do I need to go back there if they're not? That was good. I'm not talking about church. And if I were to sit down and have this conversation with, let's say, confidence with love, for example, or uppity unicorn, for another example, we are on very different paths spiritually. But when you get serious enough about what you're doing, all three of us would be able to tell you, like I said, all three of us are on very different paths. But when you get serious enough about what you're doing, you realize that you represent things much. Not only are you privileged to represent who you represent, but you are in a position where you can't dabble and play around it. And of course, you still remain human. As confidence with love, and if I post up the regular resources, I gotta see if I can remember to do this. Says, hey, and the Bible also teaches us, hey, we still human. Sometimes we're still humaning out here. I feel for John Morant in the sense that I can understand. I remember being 23. I've never been a 23-year-old man, but I remember being 23 and trying to find your way in the world and wondering what rules you really have to follow versus the ones you don't. But at some point, seeking to be accepted by people that are perishing, who have nothing but to live for but a good time today, will put you in that same class and will have you going that same way. John Morant is not an outlier. He's not extraordinary, except that he has extraordinary talent and access to extraordinary resources. But he's not that much different from the employee every day who's in a situation where he's in a grandchild of a plantation, he's in a grandparent of a plantation and not understanding that you exist as you bring value to the company and that's it. He's not that different from people all up and down online sitting around arguing about bus drivers versus everybody else, and every person being discussed there is an employee. Not sitting up here talking about how we get capital. Not sitting up here talking about how capital is available to us in a way that it was never available in previous centuries. You know, if you want to go from being an employee at a company to owning a part of that company, you got to go as far as your cell phone now. It's like you can work for Charmin, buy Charmin, and own it. But we get caught in these same arguments because we do not know the, the value and the capacity and the opportunity. Because if you know that you're not an N, you do not allow yourself to be referred to, nor do you seek to act like one. If you know you're not a B and H, you do not act like in the stereotypical ways, and you do not seek to be associated with that or to be allowed to be treated like that. If you know what's available and that you can get to it, then you go get it. And this is what is missing from this conversation. John, do you want it and do you believe it? And is it for you? Just because you are a generational talent does not necessarily mean because you pay financing your lifestyle and everybody else's. Is this actually what you want? Do you have anything else that you can do inside the unbelievable capacity that you have as a human being at 23 for anything you want to do? Still, probably will never have that conversation with John Morant. But I'm having this conversation with you, and I encourage you to have it with yourself and those you love so that I didn't want to call this to mess around and find out. We just didn't need to be a gotcha. Like I said, my mind went to my students and what would I do if one of my 21 to 23-year-old male students were behaving in this way? What would I do? A gotcha ain't gonna get it. Everybody's piling on John right now. And I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it. I'm not trying to cut him any slack because he's a grown man. He knows what he's doing. And he should know the consequences. We only talk about 8 weeks. But what can we do for each other? What can we do for ourselves and each other out of this situation? Do we have friends and family that we need to get away from? Do we have online content creators that we need to stop going over and getting hurt on? Do we have patterns that we need to break? What do we need to be doing so that we don't find ourselves making situations like this for ourselves? How do we need to change our belief systems? These are all questions that John Morant needs to ask, but I need to ask it, and also so do you. I want to see us win, and y'all know I don't discriminate. I want to see black women win. I want to see black men win, and I wish that we were healthy enough in mass to have mass stories of success together. I accept the world as it is, but as we look at our own issues and do the work we need to do, and I will be putting um, the therapy and life coaching and confidence with love's course and some journal resources and some other things in the chat, the description, along with that book on Own Your Own Corporation. I just got to find that one. I really want us to focus, drill down, and work so that we're not caught in these patterns. But I can only advise it to you. I can't make you do it. I just put it out there for your consideration. All right. Y'all have a good day now. Goodbye.